Welcome to episode 9 of The Bark. I'm JP Lindsay.
I'm Drake Howard.
First off, we have an all Butler Athletics recap. Then we'll hear from Andrew Mild talking Big East baseball. And then we'll send it over to Tom Bennett and Jeffrey Nelson taking a look at this weekend's action for both the men's and women's Sweet 16.
To finish up the month of March, Butler Athletics has a busy spring schedule that carries into April. Starting off with the track teams, both the men and women's teams will head down to Raleigh, North Carolina this weekend. There, they have events on both Friday and Saturday at the Raleigh Relays at NC State. Then we will head back to Indy, where Butler Baseball will have 3 home games. They play Northwestern Friday at 4 p.m., Eastern Illinois on Saturday at noon, and then they finish the weekend off with another game against Northwestern on Sunday at noon. Women's tennis is also on campus this weekend, where they will be playing Western Kentucky at 10 a.m. on Friday, and then they play again on Wednesday at IUPUI at 5. Women's lacrosse is a 2-game slate this weekend as well, playing Cincinnati at Butler on Friday at 3 p.m., and then they will finish out the weekend on Sunday against Youngstown State at noon, with that game being at home as well. Finishing us off is men's golf, who head to Indy's own Highland Golf Club, where they are participating in the Spring Invitational, and this will be on both Monday and Tuesday. And now we go back to the studio, where we're going to talk Big East baseball with Andrew Mild.
All right, thanks, Drake. And I know with NFL free agency going on, March Madness is starting up. It's really tough to keep up with all sports, so I'm here to help you out with some Big East baseball. Let's look at the standings real quick. And you can see in the top 4, we have UConn, Georgetown, Creighton, and Butler, who as of right now would make the tournament through the first 5 weeks of the college baseball season. And then the final 4 are Xavier, St. John's, Villanova, and Seton Hall. So let's take a quick look at some surprising teams, disappointing, and which team I think is going to win it all at the end of the season. So the most surprising team for me has been the Georgetown Hoyas. Going into the season, the preseason polls put them at 7th in the Big East out of the 8 teams. Well, how are they doing it? Their offense has been on fire. They're first in the Big East in runs scored with 7.4 runs. Home runs, they have 34 and 148 runs altogether in those 20 games. And on top of that, they're led by Jake Hyde, their first baseman. He has the best average on the team with a 441, and then second in home runs in the entire conference with 8, and has the best OPS, which is on base and slugging. So he's been doing it all for the Georgetown Hoyas. And then their pitching staff has been pretty phenomenal. 3rd in ERA for the conference and 2nd in strikeouts with 182. We'll see if Georgetown keeps surprising the entire Big East as the season goes forward with their explosive offense. Next up, the disappointing team has been the Seton Hall Pirates. A lot like another Pirates team we know, they have not been very good pitching staff-wise. They have a 9.8 ERA, so almost 10 runs a game from this Pirates team. 33 home runs allowed, which is dead last in the Big East, and 175 runs have crossed the plate against Seton Hall. Their run differential is negative 125 on the season, which is top 5 worst in the country. And then on the offensive side, it's not getting any better for them. They have a 220 batting average, a 288 OBP, and they've only been able to score 50 runs this season, which is dead last in the Big East in all sort of those categories. And they've lost 5 straight games. Their record is 1-17, and preseason had them picked at 5th. So they're supposed to be a middle-of-the-pack team, but instead they're in dead last, 8th place, not a lot going on for them. But I will give them this. Their schedule has been very tough. They've played Oklahoma State. They've played Florida. And then they've started off the season against North Carolina. So they play a lot of Power 5 schools. We'll see if they can make some adjustments when the Big East play starts next month. And finally, the team I think that's going to win it all has been the UConn Huskies. They're the defending champions of the Big East, and they're playing a lot like it. Their pitching staff has been phenomenal. A 2.56 ERA combined, only 5 home runs allowed in 169 innings this year, and they have struck out 213 hitters while only walking 58. And so their big influencers have been Pat Gallagher, Austin Peterson, and Enzo Stefani, who all have ERAs below 3. Gallagher has an ERA of 1.95, and Peterson has struck out 49 hitters, which is top 10 in the country. And their offense hasn't been too bad either. They've scored 6.79 runs, which is 2nd in the Big East, and they've hit 24 home runs while scoring 129 runs. The run differential is plus 66, which is 1st in the Big East, and their record right now is 15-4, and they're ranked the number 25 team in the country. So that's my favorite, the UConn Huskies, and that's going to do it from over here For Big East Baseball, we're going to send it back over to the desk with JP Lindsay and Drake Howard.
Thanks, Andrew. Now, let's hear from Jeffrey Nelson and Tom Bennett making some picks for both men's and women's Sweet 16 action, as well as Kayvon Samuels' sleepers for the weekend.
Thanks, JP. Let's get into some Sweet 16 action on the women's side with Tom Bennett. Let's see. First matchup you have is Stanford versus Maryland on this weekend. You picked Stanford. Why?
Yeah, Stanford is looking really good right now through the first 2 rounds. They're probably the most diverse team that's left in the tournament, in my opinion. Lexi Hull dropped 36 points in that game versus Kansas and has been playing very well all around all season. I believe she's leading the team in points, rebounds, and blocks for the year. So I just think that this is going to be too much for Maryland to kind of have to go through and have to upset. So I think that is probably going to be the biggest thing for that game.
Yeah, and number 1 seeds are always hard to beat. Next game we have is Ohio State, Texas. You picked Texas.
Yeah, Rory Harmon has been balling out all season long. She's averaging 11 points a game, 4 rebounds, 5 assists, and 2 steals a game. Ohio State got really lucky in that last matchup, in my opinion. Even though they dominated throughout most of the second half, I think it was more due to poor play. I can see Texas coming out on top pretty easily here.
Right. So next matchup, NC State, Notre Dame.
NC State's been one of the best teams all year. It hasn't been a question that much. Notre Dame is a lower end seed. I'm going with consistency here. Notre Dame's been really hot, blew out 2 teams in the first 2 rounds, but NC State's been consistent all year, so I'm sticking with consistency.
Gotcha. And Indiana, UConn. Wow, you picked the upset against UConn.
I did pick the upset against UConn, and we all know how good UConn is. Coach Gino has been a phenomenal basketball coach throughout, I can't even remember how long he's been there. It's just my entire lifetime.
Feels like it's been forever.
But IU's got that storied program, much like UConn. The thing that made the big difference for me here was Indiana is an older team. They have more experience, whereas UConn is a little younger with a little more talent. I think this is where that experience is really going to come in, so I'm going to give the upset to IU.
All right.
Now, let's go over to your side here, Jeff.
Yeah.
You've got South Carolina over North Carolina in the Battle of Carolinas. Walk me through the game.
Yeah, so South Carolina, they've got Aaliyah Boston. She's one of the best players in the country. She's SEC Women's Player of the Year. I just think it's going to be too much for North Carolina to withstand the pressure that South Carolina has. They give up 54 points in 2 games. And, they only scored 49 points in that second-round matchup against Miami. But still, I think that South Carolina being the number 1 overall seed is going to be too much for North Carolina.
I agree. Now, here we got Iowa State Creighton.
Yeah.
That's a big game.
So a lot of people might be saying, well, why did I pick Creighton? I picked Creighton because they just beat Iowa and Caitlin Clark, who was one of the best scorers in the NCAA this year. And so I just think that coming off this win and the transfer from Iowa, I believe her last name is Lauren Lyles, she had the shot against Iowa to beat Iowa. And I just think that this is a game where we see 2 teams that are playing against each other. And they're very, very similar in the way that they play. And so I just think that Creighton will come out on top.
Riding the hot hand, I like it. Next, we got Louisville versus Tennessee. We're going Louisville. Why is that?
Yeah, Tennessee hasn't really been the same powerhouse they were in the early 2000s, 2010s. So I like Louisville with Haley Van Lith, who she struggled at the beginning of the year, but this tournament she's been averaging 20.5 points on 50% shooting, which is an amazing stat. And so I like Louisville and Haley Van Lith.
Yeah, no, that sounds good to me. And then our last matchup for the Sweet 16, we got Michigan versus South Dakota. Cinderella dance ends here?
Yeah, for sure. I think we see South Dakota kind of like St. Peter's on the men's side, which we'll get to in a little bit. But Michigan, I think, would just be too much for South Dakota. They won their first 2 games, but I don't think that Cinderella will get any further in this tournament.
I agree with that one. Now let's send it over, after coming up with our Elite 8, let's send it over to Kayvon Samuels to give his picks for the Sweet 16 on the women's side.
Thanks, Tom and Jeff. Welcome to a segment of Samuel's Sleepers, where I, Kayvon Samuels, will be giving you the absolute locks of this week's women and men's NCAA tournament. To start, we have a matchup between South Carolina and UNC. To no surprise, this line is set at -10. The South Carolina Gamecocks are big down low. They have a great front court. They have offensive explosion. They play defense. They're just a great all-around team. And let's be honest, UNC doesn't belong on the same court with these Gamecocks. They've had success here and there, but let's be honest, the talent of South Carolina is just going to be too much for them. That's why I'm loving this line at -10. I'm taking South Carolina, maybe even a -12, -13 range to try to get a little bit of those extra odd boosts. And this is just a great opportunity for some early cheese, early coin going in to start the Sweet 16 round in the women's tournament. Now we have a little bit closer matchup. We have Maryland facing the number 1 seed, Stanford. I love Maryland. Vegas has set this line at +7. I think they're just trying to tickle us. Maryland +7, Maryland money line. Maryland is battle tested. Yes, they have 8 losses on the season, while Stanford only has 3. But if you look at those losses, Maryland has been in the game. I think they're ready to play. I think they'll show up ready to play. Stanford, as well as we've seen 1 seeds go down all tournament, and I believe this is another opportunity to flip your money. We'll take Maryland money line. We'll take Maryland +7. Easy opportunity here to flip that money that we made with our pick of South Carolina -10. Those are my picks for this week's women's Sweet 16 round. Tom and Jeff, back to you.
All right, let's jump into the men's side in the Sweet 16 that kicks off on Thursday night. You got 1 seed Arizona versus a 5 seed Houston, and you picked Arizona. Tell me why.
Yeah, both teams have been playing a great tournament so far. Arizona had that scare versus TCU in overtime last week, and it was mainly due to the offensive rebounding that they were allowing a lot of. Houston is currently 3rd in the country in offensive rebounding, so that could pose a really big issue for Arizona. So this is why I think this is the best game in the Sweet 16. I'm giving it to Arizona because Benedict Mathurin has been balling out in this tournament so far, and I'm going to go with the talent here and go with Arizona.
All right, yep. So next matchup, we have Villanova, who's a 2 seed, and you have Michigan, who's the 11 seed.
Yeah, I really want to sit here and say Michigan, this year's UCLA, the dance darling, is going to keep powering through, but Villanova has so much experience. Jay Wright's a phenomenal coach, and as we here at Butler have seen so much of. And the backcourt differential here is really what's going to break the game for me. Between Justin Moore and Colin Gillespie, they're averaging either 15 or 16 points a game, with each getting a steal a game. So I think that that's really going to determine the game and determine the pace that Villanova's going to use to pull this one out.
Yeah, feels like Villanova's in the Sweet 16 Elite 8 every year.
Yeah.
You know, another Big East team, we see Providence. You have Providence passing up Kansas, going through into the Elite 8.
Yeah, this was a game that I struggled with when we were trying to come up with our picks, and I really want to sit here and say Kansas is this great 1 seed, but they haven't played like it through the first 2 weeks of the tournament. Providence is a consistent team, and they have a whopping 11 games that they've won by 5 or less points this year. So if Providence, who is a very whole team and a very good defensive team, can keep this game close, I think that they're going to pull this one out.
Yeah, you talked about experience in the previous matchup with Villanova. You know, Providence is a very experienced team as well. Iowa State, Miami, we have 2 teams in an 11-10 matchup. How did they get here? And, you know, you got Miami going through to the Elite 8.
Yeah, 2 Cinderella teams, and I absolutely love it. I really want to get the point across that Miami has been phenomenal versus very good teams. In a 14-day span, they beat UNC, Duke, and Auburn. So they have a lot of talent. They have a very run-and-gun type play, and I think that is really what's going to separate this game from Iowa State, who has relied mainly on turnovers from other teams, and that's what's got them here. So I'm going with Miami.
Yeah, 2 of those 3 teams that Miami's beat are still left in the tournament.
Yeah, so let's go over to your side of the bracket. You have your Arkansas versus Gonzaga, the number 1 overall seed.
Yeah, you know, Gonzaga, everybody knows how they are. They run in transition. They like to play fast and play and shoot the ball, but they've also got the inside play of Drew Timme and Chet Holmgren. I think it's going to be a tough matchup for Arkansas. They'll probably end up using 7-3 Connor Vanover on Chet Holmgren and Jalen Williams on Drew Timme. We'll see how it goes, but yeah, I have Gonzaga going through.
Yeah, a bunch of NBA talent on that Gonzaga team. Let's go over to the next game here. Duke versus Texas Tech. You have Duke going through.
Yeah, you know, you just mentioned NBA talent, and Paolo Banchero, one of the best players in college basketball, arguably a top 3 pick, along with all the guys that they also have on Duke. I think they're going to be playing for Coach K. They've been playing for Coach K through the whole tournament. We saw that against Michigan State last weekend. And, you know, I like Texas Tech a lot. They're a very good defensive team, but they also are capable of putting the ball in the basket. But I just think that Coach K and all of his experience in this tournament will outdo what Texas Tech has for Duke.
Yeah, Texas Tech is a very big fan favorite, I've noticed, with all the brackets and everything. Let's go to the next matchup, UNC versus UCLA. You got the upset of UNC.
Yeah, so I had North Carolina winning this game, mainly because of Brady Manick and how North Carolina's played in their first 2 games. They've scored over 90 points in both of the first 2 games. And there's a little bit of talk that Jaime Jaquez might be a little bit hurt. So I picked North Carolina in this matchup, just given how they've played, just coming off a win against number 1 seeded Baylor. So I have North Carolina going through to the Elite 8.
Yeah, two storied franchises. That's going to be one really good game to watch. Let's go to the last matchup. We've got Purdue versus real Cinderella of this year's tournament, St. Peter's.
Yeah, for sure. So we've got the in-state Purdue, and we've got St. Peter's from my home state of New Jersey. And, I just think that Purdue is going to be too much for St. Peter's. We see a lot of Cinderella teams. They make it to the Sweet 16. And I just think that it's hard for them to get through to the Elite Eight. They're riding high off that energy of having to play the next day or a couple days later after their first win in the round of 64, so they win that round of 32 game. And I just think that the height of Zach Edey, Travion Williams inside, along with Jaden Ivey on the outside, will just be too much for St. Peter's, and this is where their run ends.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting seeing that Jaden Ivey going up against that press defense, specifically late in the game. So here's our Elite Eight, and then we're going to pass it back to Kayvon to get some of his picks.
Thanks, Tom and Jeff. Now for Samuel Sleeper's pick of the day. I'm loving this Arkansas-Gonzaga game. The line is set at plus 9.5 for Arkansas. Vegas really messed up here. This is a lot of points for an SEC team playing against Gonzaga. This SEC team in Arkansas is physical. They see physical teams night in and night out, and they still manage to win the SEC. And if you really want to have good odds, I would even take Arkansas -1. I think they run away with this one. I also think this game is close throughout its entirety, maybe even goes into OT. But with JD Note and his scoring ability, he's one of the best scorers in the country, if not the best scorer in the country. He can score with the best of them. I believe that Arkansas wins this game, and if to be on the safe side, you can also take them plus 9.5. Great opportunity here to really flip those winnings once again and get on a hot streak going into my last and final pick. And for Samuel Sleeper's last and final pick of the Sweet 16 March Madness bracket, I have to touch this Duke and Texas Tech game. Let's be honest here, I didn't want to touch it with a stick at first, but in the spirit of March Madness, I have to. And that's why I'm going to take Duke -1. I think they're a good basketball team. I think they have a lot of offensive talent. I think they're big down low. While Texas Tech is the #1 rated defense in the country, and they've shown that they can hang in there with the best of them, I think the coaching is going to really be the last and final factor. And we all know Coach K is the best coach in college basketball history. That's why I'm going to take an alternate line of Duke -3. Absolutely take this. They will win this game by 3 points solely because it'll come down to free throws at the end. They will cover, and you will be happy. Tom and Jeff, please don't fade these picks. Now, back to you.
Thanks, Kayvon. For more content just like this or other episodes of The Bark, head over to Butler 360 Sports. I'm Drake Howard.
And I'm JP Lindsay. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.